Hi, I'm Richard Caddy. I'm joined again by Jess, Tyrrell and Rachel Newton from the Equalities and Inclusion team. And we're talking now about inclusive decision making. What is that?
In my view, inclusive decision making is about making sure at every point of a project, for example, we make lots of different decisions every day at work, don't we? We make lots of little decisions in the course of a project or of a wider thing. That doesn't make any sense. But what I'm trying to say is that it's about making sure that we're considering everyone that we're commissioning for at lots of different points, and that we're using a pragmatic and data-driven approach to make decisions, and that we're looking objectively at that data to make decisions.
Yeah, we don't all have, loads and loads of time. Are we under pressure at times? Yes. Are we stressed? Probably. But what we're talking about when we're talking about inclusive decision making isn't taking ages and ages and ages to make a decision and going out and speaking to absolutely every single person who lives in your local area about a new service. It's, as Rachel said, it's being pragmatic about working out who do we think this service might impact, who do we need to talk to about this decision, and how do we get them involved to make sure that further down the line this particular service is effective, clinically effective, cost effective, etc. It's about making sure the service is tailored to the individual, and we can't know that unless we work out who is most likely to be impacted, and how do we make sure we're inclusive in our decision making to ensure their views and needs are taken into account.
So to use a clinical analogy, if a surgeon is about to operate on you, it's a good idea if they've got x-rays and CT scans and blood tests and things like that.
That would always help, Richard. That would always help.
They're just not taking a scalpel to you on a hunch.
Exactly. Yeah, on a hunch you go in and say, I've got a bit of stomach ache. The first thing they're not going to do is say, right, come on, get on the operating table. It's the same sort of process, and I think you'd agree, Rachel, wouldn't you? It's about going through that pragmatic approach of working out, right, how do we go about this decision in a way that makes sure we are taking accountability and taking into account the views and needs of other people, and it's to ultimately make sure that decision that is made is effective, or the service that's implemented is effective. Or if we move a hospital and we move it outside of a city centre area where we know that there's going to be high levels of deprivation, how do we make sure that those people who are more likely to access A&E in those areas can still access those hospital services and aren't going to be either discriminated against or unable to access those services if the hospital is located elsewhere?
But everybody wants the same thing, don't they? Everybody wants a hospital 10 minutes away. They don't want it right on their doorstep because the ambulance is going past to become a nuisance. So you're not going to please everybody.
No, you're never going to be able to please everybody, and one decision is not going to work for everyone. When we're making decisions, in an ideal world, we've had tons and tons of resources and we'd be able to commission very specifically for lots of groups of people. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world, and we have to make sure that the service that we commission makes sense and is accessible and is usable for as many people as possible. We are never going to be able to make everything super easy for everyone, but we want to get as close to that point as possible, and inclusive decision making sort of gets us as close to that point as we possibly can.
So is that why we spend so much time and effort on consultations? And when I say the word consultation, that's a very specific legal thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it is, and I think it's right to do so. I think we've talked about evidence-based decision making these decisions in a pragmatic way, but that evidence not only includes kind of things like the data that sits behind it, the data, the insight, the intelligence, it includes going out and speaking to people through that comms and engagement approach, getting their opinions, speaking to them about what is important to them about a new hospital build, for example. If we know what is important to those people in those communities, we can make sure that we're more effective in the way that we make decisions moving forward.
Right, and the consequences of not doing that are?
Well, worst case, legal challenge, ultimately. And it's not the first time it's happened when decisions have been made very quickly, and it's not that people, I think, have consciously decided not to consider the impact on other people. It's more often than not the unintentional consequences of the likes of unconscious bias, for example, that creep in. And then what happens is that decisions are made and they've not included or involved the people who should really be involved. And that decision then means that they're discriminated against or unfairly treated or left out of certain things when they should be included in the first place.
And just to build on Jess's point, the legal challenge is sort of the first 10% of inclusive decision making. We want to use inclusive decision making so that we make sure that things work as effectively as possible. We're never like I said before, we're never going to get that as specifically as we want to for everyone. But avoiding legal challenge is the first 10% in my view, and then the rest of the 90 is trying to get it as close to perfect as we possibly can. And as a public sector organisation, we have to adhere to the public sector equality duty to prove legally that we have shown due regard to the protected characteristics that are listed in the Equality Act, but also to other health inclusion groups, people who are more likely to be susceptible to health inequalities or poor health.
How does political pressure feed into this?
So the vaccine programme was an interesting example of this. We were very keen, or the government was very keen, to get jabs in arms. But when I was working on the vaccine programme, the things that we really wanted to look at is who is not getting the vaccine. The people that, as soon as they get the text, rush straight to the GP or straight to the vaccine centre to go get their vaccine. That's not the people that we're really worried about. It's the people who are reading stuff that, the vaccine isn't safe, or they're being told by big community leaders that they shouldn't go and get the vaccine. And making sure that the appropriate information gets into the hands of these people in a way that is understandable to them and in a way that is accessible to them is really important. So, to answer your question, it's political pressure will change how we commission services and will change, how we look at information. But it's not who accesses, it's who doesn't access that's sort of the important bit.
Often the people who are, as we call them, left behind.
So this just makes good pragmatic business sense, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely. And I think when we're looking at the business case for inclusive decision making, from a workforce point of view, we know that if we've got a workforce that feels valued, that feels listened to and represented, then we're going to have higher rates of staff retention and hopefully lower rates of any other dissatisfaction in the workplace. We know essentially we're going to have a more productive, valued workforce. And then you look at it from the patient side of view. If we have patients and communities that feel heard, they feel listened to and respected and again valued, we know that they're more likely to engage with healthcare professionals. They're more likely to have those open and honest conversations that inform us better about their needs and their lived experience.
You can have all the money in the world, but if people don't actually want to work for you, nothing's going to happen.
No, exactly. And that's why for inclusive decision making, it's just as much about our workforce, about our staff, as it is about our patients. If we've not got the workforce to deliver that care to those patients, then how do we do it? We've got to make sure in that first instance we've got a workforce that feels represented and valued and enabled and empowered to be able to do the job they do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and there's something here to be talked about in terms of like cognitive safety and, the best bit about having a diverse workforce is diverse ideas. Having lots of different people from just different ways of thinking. For example, I read an article the other day about how people with dyslexia have like more creative brains and they're more likely to be able to think outside of the box. So that is just a very small example of why having lots of different people with lots of different protected characteristics or lived experiences, backgrounds is really important, because we're more likely to get diverse views from those people, and then we're more likely to get closer to the best decision. If we're living in an echo chamber where everyone's agreeing with each other, we're not really going to get to the best case scenario, are we? Having lots of different views, having a bit of a disagreement is really important, because that's how we're more likely to get closer to best practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Jess and Rachel, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
If you would like to know more about Midlands and Lancashire Commissioning Support Unit, go to our website mrcsu.co.uk.